What's going on, you guys? Ken here, also known as Silent85. Welcome to another vlog. Forgive me, I'm on break at work. I know I look a little rough. I haven't been sleeping very well the last few nights. But, throughout this darkness I'm dealing with in my own life, mental aspect and whatnot, there's a light that I have always held as I'm getting older, and that I think a lot of generations before me have held as well, and that's hope for the future of our kind, for humanity, for future generations. A lot of people would argue nowadays, depending on your ideals and your alignment, wherever you fall, spiritually, religiously, politically, there's people that would argue there's no hope for the future. The future generations are screwed because they're not how they used to be. That's really dumb. If humanity remained how it used to be the whole time, we'd never get anywhere. There wouldn't be any evolution of any kind of ideas in society or science or even beliefs. Um, and we would literally be screwed. We can't get anywhere if things remain the same. What you're seeing represented today in a lot of generations, newer generations, ones that are even younger than I am, which still blows my mind. I'm 38. Um, is a lot more inclusion and a lot more involvement. Newer generations, especially because of more accessible data, and this data isn't being funneled through one direct source like TV channels used to be, radio stations, whatnot. This was really the only way people knew what was happening around the planet, because it would be filtered. It would be filtered to locales, it would be filtered to states, to nations, to even, you know, certain religious places. But because of the internet, because of free and open data, um, humanity has changed drastically. We Over the generations, because we've had access to this data, um, because we've had access to more books and it's not being limited. Local juries at libraries would remove books because they didn't want kids to read them. Schools still do that today, which blows my mind. Um, but knowledge is knowledge. What you do with knowledge is a tool. The data you take in and how you process it is up to you. It's not up to anybody else. And forgive me, I've been picking at my fingernail. It's a really bad habit. But what you're seeing in current generations is people stepping aside and really taking on, even in life, partners, friends, coworkers, lovers, even, um, that they feel more comfortable with, and they're not being pressured as much by society to be somebody they're not. I mean, I lived through that growing up. I was, for those that don't know my story, I had a survival mode kick in because I was abused as a kid, because I wasn't a certain way. Naturally, I was not a certain way. Um, in a nutshell, I was a logical person. I was very scientifically inclined mentally. I worked off proof. I worked off fact. What was in front of me? I found it very hard to, um, you know, think any other way. It didn't work, and so I had to play a part. And in a lot of ways, I was masking. And if you don't know what masking is, you can look it up. But you put on and you have these learned habits and behaviors, um, because you don't understand how things work, essentially. So anyway, but you're not seeing that in current generations. You're not. Well, I mean, you are here and there, but not as much, because as time goes on, we're becoming a more inclusive society. And let me say this: anybody that would try to limit that, anybody that would try to change that because they wanted to go back to the old ways, very ignorant and very dangerous, in my opinion. Just because one person, or a minority of people, a small group of people, not minorities, but a small group of people that want to see things remain the same, keep it annex time and keep it in one way. It should only be that way. Any other way is a sin or a lie, or it shouldn't happen. That is a really dangerous deficit to humanity. Um, and it's really disturbing in ways, because they want to impede on the progress of what we could become and where we could be. Thankfully, socially, when it comes to gay rights, you know, if you're transitioning from being one person to another, choosing who you want to be, choosing what partner you have, and everything related and then everything in between, we're making a lot of progress on that. It used to be that you wouldn't even whisper stuff like that without being made fun of or bullied or locked up or even tortured and killed. um, Unfortunately, there's some communities that's still a fact, but there's hope in knowing that we are making progress and that not being our reality. And newer generations are so accepting. These kids are all right because they're doing so much better than we are, and that is the key. And I think that's what's lost a lot in today's in the older generations, is that there's a lost perspective of, we should hope for our future generations to be better than we are, to be more understanding than we are, to develop further than we are, not keep them how we are. That's not the whole fucking point. And I'll never understand that. I will never understand how people think like that. You're not how I raised you because you're not how I was. I mean, look, I'm not a parent, but I'm an uncle, you know. I'm a brother. And from those perspectives, for sure, and I can only guess as a parent, it's even more powerful, but I feel this pull that my brothers, my sisters, my niece is growing up into generations that will do far better than mine has. And mine is a bit of a last generation because I grew up as part of the last generation that didn't have internet. I didn't have internet until I was 12 or 13. Solid. I wasn't involved until about 12, 13 because the internet didn't show up until mid 90s, and I was 11 years old by then. So I had a childhood that I had toys. I had video games because of Nintendo, Sega, and a lot of the stuff in there. I read a lot of books, and I read about characters that lived in societies that was accepting of everybody. Take Star Trek, for instance. Star Trek is the story of an evolved humanity that went through its own wars, its own trials and tribulations, and it became something greater. It became something a lot more inclusive, and it even delved into new worlds. And I believe, and that's not a word I use a whole lot because of my upbringing, and what I went through, but I believe that there's a lot of hope for future generations for us to be better, and you're seeing that today. To some people, this may not make sense. You may not get it. You may not want it, but it is what it is. And to fight against that tide, to fight against that progress, it says a lot about you. It says a lot about you. And I would just, in my own personal opinion, I would question yourself. What is your motive behind that? Are you doing that because you're an extreme traditionist and you want things to be the way they were? Or are you doing that because you were told that as a kid and you held on to it? Because if you didn't hold on to it and you even attempted to change, you were told that you would be whooped, or you would be told you would go somewhere really bad, or something really bad would happen to you. If you are holding on to that out of fear, that drive is really questionable. But if you have hope that we can be who we want to be, and kids can be who they want to be, people can be who they want to be, do what they want to do, say what they want to say, live how they want to live. If you get that reference, kudos. But if not, no worries. If you have that hope, then hold on to it and keep fighting for it, because it's important. It is important that humanity keep moving forward. On a biological level, we are always evolving. We haven't stopped evolving. Not as human beings. We're not at the apex. We're only as far as we are now. We're going to go further. And that's my belief. Despite whatever we may face as a whole, as humanity, as humankind, mankind, despite whatever false realities we force ourselves into, despite whatever these groups here and there, these factions, these sects, sects, despite whatever they try to force on human beings as a whole, despite how torn we become due to our beliefs, our religions, our political outlines, whatever it may be. We're still here on this planet. We are fighters. We survive. We thrive. You can put us down to our lowest numbers and we still make it through. Disease, war, famine, natural events, whatever. With that said, we also have a bad habit of making it worse, too. Bad habit. And we're learning. Thankfully, that's another thing. Newer generations are learning because we now have access to a lot more data. It can be overwhelming. It can be really overwhelming at times because older generations are only used to taking in so much information mentally. But as these new generations grow up on more data to process, you get used to it at a younger age, and as you get older, it'll get even better. That's just my layman opinion and observation so far, but I could be wrong on that part about humans being able to process so much data. Obviously, we do tire out. You can get overwhelmed, but I believe as the generations go on, that threshold will get higher and higher. And we'll be all the better for it. For the most part, there are always drawbacks to certain evolutions, to certain advantages. But that's just my opinion and my belief. Stay safe, stay sane. Remember, you're awesome. Never let the world tell you otherwise. See ya.